it's so nice to have you all here at this 6th annual Frontiers of Prevention International Forum. It's always such a joy to see all of these people that we've been talking to on email over the past several months finally coming together into one space. We want to begin by acknowledging that Binghamton University and this building is on the ancestral land of the Oneida and Onondaga nations, both part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and both survivors of settler colonial genocide in the past and continuing to resist erasure and fight for their human and collective rights in the present. It's amazing for us to be doing the 6th annual Frontiers of Prevention International Forum. The first one was back in 2017. Some of the people in this room were actually here as part of that. And it's great to have them back and continuing to come on a regular basis. It's really hard to think of a time in recent memory when the prevention agenda has faced more challenges than it is right now. The war between Russia and Ukraine following Russia's second invasion of Ukraine has now entered its fourth year. It's been going on for 3 years. The Sudanese civil war is entering its 3rd year, and it is, of course, serving as a cover for renewed atrocity crimes, including genocide in Darfur. South Sudan is on the precipice of erupting into new waves of violence as we speak. Despite the efforts of an active resistance and the Venezuelan electorate, Maduro maintains authoritarian control in Venezuela. And of course, atrocity crimes perpetrated by the Israeli government in Gaza since the horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7th, 2023 are ongoing after the recent breakdown of the ceasefire agreement and renewal of violence. And of course, it's hard to speak about this in the US without acknowledging that in just 11 weeks, the Trump administration has completely dismantled many democratic institutions, isolated the United States from the rest of the world, and through the elimination of USAID, put untold numbers of people at increased risk of atrocity crimes and of death from a reduction of humanitarian aid. The list goes on and on and on. We could talk about many other cases as well. There are sadly way too many to note fully here. So the deck, as we know, is stacked against us, to be sure. But it's for that very reason, I would say, that in this moment, it's so essential that those of us working on preventing atrocities come together, share what we're experiencing, and help to motivate each other to arrive at new solutions to respond to these challenges. Whether you're working at the local, national, regional, or international level, whether you're representing a government or civil society, whether you consider yourself a practitioner, a policymaker, a scholar, a student, who will be one of those things, we at I-GMAP deeply believe that all of us have lessons to learn from each other, and that is only through continued engagement and collaboration at all of those levels and across all of those sectors that we can make positive change. And this belief really lies at the heart of the Frontiers of Prevention International Forum.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Oh, no, I'm just going to project. So a word about the forum. I mean, a lot of you have been here before, and so welcome back. As Carrie mentioned, we have 2 veterans, I think at least 2, Annie Bird and Jim Finkel, who were at the very first Frontiers of Prevention way back in 2017. I wanted to give you all in the audience, especially those who haven't been here before, just a little bit of a word about the process, about the way that we work this, because it is quite different than a lot of the meetings or certainly the academic conferences that you might have attended in the past. This is not a conference in the sense of speakers presenting prepared remarks, going through their slides, finishing, and then having a little bit of time left over for Q&A. Especially for you academic people, you know that drill very, very badly, and I can't believe I'm the only person in this room who hasn't sat on an airplane on the way home from one of those meetings thinking, why didn't I just read their papers at home while I was, comfortable? Why am I burning this jet fuel? Well, a lot of you have burned a lot of jet fuel to get here, and our gratitude to you is profound. And one of the ways we want to show that gratitude is to offer you a kind of format and a kind of experience that has, by very deliberate design, parted company with that kind of model. Frontiers of Prevention as a form is based on conversation, not presentations. We specifically instruct, demand, I guess would be not too strong a word, that our panelists not present prepared remarks. And as you can see, there are no slides. So we also make a really concerted effort to bring together into each of our themed panels people, some of whom know one another and have been working together for years, others who will be meeting one another for the first time. So with each panel, what we're going for is a conversation. And that's why we've instructed our panelists not only to respond to the questions of the moderator, but far more importantly, to start to talk to one another. Without any particular plan on how that conversation is supposed to go. This is where you audience members also come in, because at the after roughly an hour of conversation, we open the floor to not Q&A from the audience, but conversation with the audience. Particularly for you other panelists, there is an enormous amount of expertise gathered in this room. And I think many panelists could have been on multiple panels. So please don't be shy, and you students as well, please don't be shy about joining in once the conversation pivots to include the entire room. A few logistical things, as you will, please make sure that you look at your programs. Because of the way that the panel is, the event is structured, and particularly because we have a large online audience, hi there, from wherever you are joining us from, the start and the end times for all panels are hard stop and hard start times. We will be completely and utterly punctual. What that means is that we would really appreciate it if you were to track your own time management and make sure that you're back ready for the next panel right at the start time. That would logistically be much, much appreciated. There are restrooms on this floor, on every floor. If you, the restrooms here are located right around this corner here. There are also restrooms on every floor. There are gender neutral restrooms on the 4th floor if you would like to use those. What am I forgetting?
Just talking about the breaks in this evening's.
Yeah, please.
We intentionally schedule long coffee breaks and long lunches to encourage conversation so that the conversation doesn't end when the panels end. So all of that will be taking place right outside where we just had the breakfast. And additionally, this evening, we are also right outside. There'll be like a 30-minute break, and then we'll be having our award ceremony for our annual Nadia Rubai Memorial Prize, where we'll be honoring the Parent Circle Family Forum. And there will also be a concert, a musical performance by our resident practitioner, Kai Mata. So it should be an exciting event that will be starting at 4:30.
Thanks. So first and foremost, before we get underway, which I promise we're about to do, there's never too many times to express our gratitude to our workshop participants, our forum participants. They have flown in coach for a very, very long way, some of them to get here. They have put up with canceled flights and delayed flights and layovers and car rides and bus rides to physically get themselves to this place. And so our gratitude for all of you, for your willingness to physically get yourselves here for an in-person event rather than the dreaded Zoom conference is great. And we would just want to thank you for that. This conference, this forum itself, like so much else of our programming, is not possible without the generous support of the Charles E. Scheidt Family Foundation. And although Charlie couldn't join us this weekend, we're hoping, Charlie, that you're there on the other end of that gizmo there. And so thank you, as always, for your generous support that makes this and all of our other programming possible. We have a special debt to our amazing Assistant Director, Nicole Barron, who has been working in a way that I can't quite wrap my mind around for the last 9 or 10 months, but certainly in the last 2 months, who has made it possible, made all this possible. So thank you, Nicole. Yay.
We also want to point out just 2 other groups of people that are here that everyone should know about, who aren't necessarily participating in the panels, but are incredibly important parts of the work that we do at I-GMAP. The first, we have a faculty fellows program where faculty, starting at Binghamton University, but now all over the country and hopefully soon all over the world, spend a year with us getting trained on how to incorporate atrocity prevention issues into the classes that they're teaching. And they come from a range of disciplines, some more closely associated on face value with atrocity prevention, but some from disciplines that we wouldn't necessarily associate with it at first, like business or nursing or theater and dance. But they're all interested in teaching their students how they can be stakeholders in the work that we're doing in atrocity prevention. And some of them have joined us. So if you are a faculty fellow of this cohort this year, please raise your hand.
Wow, nice.
We're going to have a special table set aside at lunch so that you all can get a chance to meet each other, because they've all been interacting online for the entire academic year. And this is the first time many of them are getting to meet each other. So we're so happy to have you here. And then another very important group of people who are here, and we're very happy that they're representing us well, is our students who are part of either our Master's in Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention, our undergraduate minor, or our graduate certificate. Raise your hand if you're one of our students.
Yay.
These are the ones that will be asking very informed questions and comments during the Q&A, and who will also be coming up to you to speak during the coffee breaks without embarrassment or shame to make connections with you. Thank you all so much for being here.
Okay, let's get going, shall we? So we're going to start off with our experts panel, and so I'd like to have those folks on this panel please come join us here in the conference area. Okay, let's take turns introducing them.
Okay.
All right, let me. So for those of you all the way in the back, I wish we had a raised stage here so that you could see, but we don't. So let me know if this, if you want to move up closer so you can see. A couple of years ago, we got into the habit of starting off the forum with this particular kind of panel where we bring together
you got old friends onto this panel.
Yes.
We apologize.
okay, where we bring together. I mean, there's a lot of experts in this room, so the choice of experts is a little bit arbitrary. But these are people that whose opinions we know and trust and respect. And we want to start off, as Carrie mentioned, it's been quite a year since our last Frontiers of Prevention. Lots of challenges and lots of opportunities as well, I guess. So, Abdullah, would you mind coming up? Thank you. And Carrie, thank you. So let me just briefly introduce the panelists, and I'll get things started. So on your far right is Annie Bird, our colleague Annie Bird, who you folks in the Faculty Fellows Program have been benefiting from her wisdom and her input for the last several months. She has over 20 years of experience in atrocity prevention and global peace and security. Previously, she was Senior Program Officer at Wellspring Philanthropic Fund, Instructor at Princeton. She's also served as Senior Policy Advisor for the State Department's Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations, Fellow at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. She's had roles at the International Center for Transitional Justice, a group that you students in my TJ class know all about. UNICEF, BENTEC, and NGOs in East Timor, Argentina, and Senegal. And so, Annie, thank you very much for joining us.
I should also say that Annie has spent this year working with our faculty fellows and providing them feedback for all of the work that they've been doing. So we're happy that she's been doing that. Do we go next?
Yeah.
Next up is Tibi Galis. Dr. Tibi Galis is the executive director of the Auschwitz Institute for the Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities. Before that organization started in 2006, and he's been with them since then. But before that, he's also worked as an associate researcher for the Parliament of the UK on helping develop the country's position on the UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. He's been a special rapporteur for the Swedish government, and he got his PhD in Holocaust and Genocide Studies from the Strassler Center at Clark University.
So immediately next to me is our good friend and colleague Abdullahi Borohalake from Refugees International. Abdullahi is an African policy expert with over a decade of experience in security, conflict, human rights, refugee work, and strategic communications. He has regularly appeared in the media as an expert guest. In fact, I was just watching him on Al Jazeera last night on South Sudan. He has a book chapter on Kenya's security agencies and the war in Somalia in the Oxford Handbook of Kenyan Politics. Abdullahi, thank you so much for joining us.
Back to the other side is Bridget Moix, who is the General Secretary for the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Dr. Moix has worked for 30 years on issues of international peace and security with a focus on U.S. foreign policy, locally led peace building, and atrocities prevention. And she currently leads the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which is a Quaker organization based in Washington, D.C., working with a nationwide network of community-based advocates to lobby Congress, U.S. Congress, for a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world.
And finally, right in the middle is Sunday Abdul Shafi, senior regional advisor from Freedom House, who's worked for a decade now in the East and Horn of Africa, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Uganda, working on peace building, youth leadership, and human rights advocacy. He was the founding staff of Sudan Democracy First Group, a Sudanese advocacy and think tank organization based in Uganda. Before that, he was a Sudan Human Rights Monitoring Associate at the African Center for Peace and Justice Studies. So welcome to you as well. So we deliberately underplanned this panel, and as always, what is great is when you guys start engaging one another. So I'm sure that you're going to be doing that in just a moment. But I mean, we have people who really have both a regional focus on, especially on East Africa and the Sahel. We also have people whose work is really global in scope and involves also a lot of interaction with governments. And so one of the things that I would love to start with, and maybe I'll ask Tibi to start us off on this, is obviously the elephant in the room is the United States' withdrawal from, as far as we can tell, any commitment to international peace building, diplomacy, soft power, multilateral world order. One of the things that I'll ask our African specialists to comment on this as well, but what are the most obvious and maybe the less obvious knock-on effects of that sudden abrupt vacuum in American influence, especially in the region, in East Africa and the Sahel, where we have not only ongoing conflicts in the DRC and in Sudan, but we have simmering conflicts in South Sudan and frankly in Eritrea and Ethiopia. I mean, what's it? So maybe I can make my question a little bit more specific to Tibi. You work a lot with government partners in trying to leverage diplomacy to not just address ongoing violence, but to head off potential atrocity violence. How has your own work changed in the last 4 months, and what are some of the obvious effects and maybe some of the less obvious effects in terms of new actors, new arrangements of power, new constellations? Does that make sense? That question?
Yeah. I mean, yes, the question makes sense. Is this on?
Yeah.
Do you need me to speak into it?
I don't think it would be a bad idea.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Pleasure being here with you, and thanks for the invitation. in terms of the changes that we are experiencing, I'm here on this panel with amazing people working in this area. I think we haven't yet had the opportunity to coordinate too much about what these weeks are meaning for all of us. So I'm bringing some narrow perspective from the AIPG experience here. But the withdrawal of the US from the existing grand atrocity prevention infrastructure, whatever that means or meant beforehand, leaves a big vacuum. Part of that vacuum has to do with direct programming that is being carried out in high-risk societies that was mostly supported by the United States. And that much of that program, mainly through USAID's, it's not closed, I guess, but it doesn't really exist either. And through its stopping of its programs, much of that programming has disappeared. It had to stop because of a pause initially, and then it got defunded. Those programs don't exist anymore. My organization is in that situation related to some of our programming, especially in Uganda. So what this means is actually that those partnerships that were developed in many societies to deal with risk of atrocities, while still existing in terms of the partnerships between organizations, the actual programming doesn't happen. Consequently, we are trying to invent, other ways to deal with the risk and to mobilize. It also means, in a very practical way, that we are trying to find other partners who can come in and fill that void. It's rather hard. You might have noticed the usual Global North supporters for this kind of work. They are all going through an authoritarian spring, one might say, unfortunately. So the winds are blowing in the wrong direction on that matter. There's a lot of focus in places in Europe on the Ukrainian conflict, and consequently that is not allowing for resources to go to societies that are not seen as, and this is a horrible word that many of the Global North funders use as priorities for their expenditure. So there's a withdrawal of traditional resource providing alliances. So lots of the work goes now into recreating and finding solutions for who are the states who are going, or governments or other actors who are going to step in and support the work. That is, of course, the result of many dysfunctions in our international system, the wrongful allocation of resources, inequalities. Please understand that that's in the background of all this. So lots of the work has to do with trying to get the work to continue now that work has been, to a certain extent, stopped. In addition to that, and I'm very curious what my colleagues think, this is the second idea, I have a lot more to say, but I need to stop, is that there's an environment of perceived permissiveness that has emerged in many societies given the US's behavior at home and the US's withdrawal from lots of the systems that are upholding dignity around the human dignity around the world, human rights, and serving as the basis for atrocity prevention. And I know this sounds to many people who haven't really, who have been at home in the last few weeks, it might sound rather exaggerated and alarmist, but I'm telling you it's not. It's really bad, the way this is impacting the environment in authoritarian societies, where all of a sudden there's no concern about the words that would come from the US Embassy related to the treatment of human rights defenders and of minorities. So in a more practical way, actually, probably this is more tragic and a bigger deal than the disappearance of resources, and very concerning for us. So the effort is also about re-establishing some of the accountability systems internationally that have to do with maintaining a somewhat norm-based order, because we know the norm-based order didn't work fully ever. Okay, that was my starting penny. I don't know who wants to go next.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good to meet everyone here. Is it working? No.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I just wanted, react on how that, kind of transpired in particular in African context. And as you say, it's authoritarian spirit. This is a season where most of the dictators and authoritarian are more empowered than ever before. And just looking at this as the global systems that we have that protects human rights and actually do some actions at the UN level. If we have a United States withdrawn from the Human Rights Council, that is like, it's a very strong message. That is where every year, every country's human rights expert, independent expert come and discuss the context of violations. And that is where human rights defenders and organizations actually compile files of people at risk and actually discuss that, and it will play a very key role into prevention. It plays a key role in creating different diplomatic tools to pressure the regimes to prevent some of those, or at least shame some of the regimes that at least have some face if those conflicts even have an international external spoilers. And with that, we had ICC as a tool for accountability. The US is outside ICC now, but it's still, we see a lot of challenge on the ICC. We see now UN Human Rights Council become ineffective, and more every day we have downturn of all of these institutions of accountability, and that really emboldens the state and non-state actors that have intention of committing atrocities. And because of the sense of lack of accountability or mechanisms of accountability, and this is very visible in Sudan case, for instance. If you see the 2005, that was the Darfur case was the first case that is being submitted from unanimous vote at the UN Security Council and refer it to ICC. This is yours, take it. This is the first ever happened in 2005. After that, until today, there was no real fruit being seen. But if you see that for Atrocity, the UN Human Rights Report in 2005, the fact-finding mission, and then you read what happens in April 2023, and everything in between, you see the similar names and similar behaviors repeated because there was no mechanism of accountability. And that is a very bad example for actors that either they are state or non-state that commit atrocities, and that emboldens, for instance, similar actors in South Sudan, similar actors in Chad, similar actors in South Central Africa, or similar actors all trans-Sahel region to feel that lack of accountability. And the trajectory of this impact of this on this next 5 or 4 years, it really looks dark. Looks dark because it is not only this small conflict that we see or magnitude large like Sudan. They are not internal problem, political problem that has only an internal dimension. They have a very strong external actors that actually foil this conflict and have a lot of influence. And whenever you have an atrocity where you have an external actor, it is actually unstable. It's very difficult for any internal forces to be able to control the outcome of it. And that's why strong mechanisms like UN, like other regional institutions, and even African Union and others are very important. But at this moment, they are absolutely kind of out of picture.
Thank you. I'd like to hear Abdullahi on this as well, but first maybe Bridget, can you follow up on what you've heard so far? And don't be shy about talking to each other, about asking each other questions.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do think that this phrase, the authoritarian spring, is going to be a takeaway from this conversation for me, because I think the impacts that we're seeing also in the United States of what is happening, I think we need to think about the end of U.S. influence in the way that it's been, and certainly for human rights, for atrocity prevention, for peace building. We're not going to be seeing that. We're going to be seeing the opposite globally and then internally in the U.S. The U.S. is actually becoming one of the bad actors, even more than maybe it has been at different times in the past. I was talking to a lawyer recently about threats to nonprofits in the U.S. who work on issues like this. And she basically said, our advice is that you now need to think about the U.S. as a hostile government for civil society, for people working on human rights. And that, it kind of just sunk in. We sort of knew this was coming. It's been like the U.S., we had a Trump administration before, and it was really bad, and we were concerned. But this is a whole new level of dismantling of democracy in the U.S. And the knock-on effects globally that you've heard, I think, are going to only be increased in the coming few years. We're just starting to see the knock-on effects. I mean, the tariffs also, just from yesterday, the knock-on effects economically of what's going to happen globally and how that realigns alliances. We don't yet know, I don't think, what's the fallout's going to be, or what the new configuration of balances of or imbalances of power are going to be. But I think we are at a moment that is really taking away the foundation that was laid post World War II for human rights, for international institutions. As flawed as they all were, and as much as we wanted to improve those institutions and the U.S. role in them, the dismantling of that foundation is what is happening right now, and we don't know what can be rebuilt yet. I do think things can be rebuilt.
Well, let me, and maybe I'll ask Andy to sound in this too. My friends will laugh at me when I say this, but why so gloomy? I mean, why so gloomy? Why not hold open the possibility that the new administration, with its authoritarian tendencies, also includes less incompetence than Trump won, but still plenty of incompetence, as we're seeing right now with a whole range of high-level cabinet appointments and economic policies. So, what would you discourage me from saying something like, "Yeah, it's going to be a terrible 4 years. The midterm elections will tell us a lot about the prospects for a recovery, and these institutions have been harmed with knock-on effects that go on for years and years, but they can be rebuilt, and things can be refunded, and programs can be restarted." So, again, this is not my way of looking at the world, but I'm going to represent like the sunshine and rainbows, theory here. Why isn't it a little early to be drawing these deeply dire conclusions?
Thank you. And thank you again for having me. And I want to just give a shout out to all the faculty fellows who I've had such the joy and pleasure, sunshine and rainbows, in interacting with, because I mean, for me, that gives me a lot of hope. Just on that point is the work that you are all doing and the work that AIPG is doing. Just a moment to really reflect on that. Like, I see that as the institutionalization of atrocity prevention work that we were trying to inculcate within the State Department when I was there. And when I come back 8 years later to this conference and I look at the people that are here and the work that is happening and the students that are engaging and the faculty across all the disciplines across this country that are deeply engaging in this work, I am filled with incredible hope. So I just, like, we can't forget that that's like, we are doing the work and you all are doing the work and everyone in here. If there's any a group of people that can rise to this moment, it is us. We work on atrocities. We can handle this particular moment. I mean, yes, I think we can handle this particular moment. So, yes. And the other part that I think on this, like I think about Nadia, again, I want to bring Nadia in just to the opening panel and to bring in, she's a founder of this work that you're all doing at Binghamton. And she was embodying presence and care for the issues and herself and her colleagues. And I just like cannot understate the importance of that kind of that sort of energy that we need to be bringing for each other. And I worked on a project last year on women leaders in peace and security, and I was blown away at the absolute horror of the challenges that these women, that the people that are holding this field together are going through, and also inspired by the possibilities for what we need to do to be supporting the particular people in this field. So that'll just be my plug for a moment. But the support and care that we need for ourselves as individuals and as a community and as a field in this moment feels really, really important. Yes, but yes, it's dire. Yes, it is dire. And we're going to keep on going. And we're going to keep on going. The other approach, I liked when you offered the question about the different unique approaches and actors and tools. I think you posed that question, Max, when I was asking you about this panel. So I just want to bring that in while I have the mic. Is what I was really inspired by over the last few years are thinking about non-institutional approaches to atrocity prevention, you know, the feminist and the indigenous approaches to atrocity prevention. And I just want to bring those levels in too, because yes, the institutions are important. Yes, they are crumbling. And guess what? There are people everywhere that have been doing this work, are doing this work, will continue to do this work. And we need to be looking to them and lifting those models up. For those of us that sit in various positions of power and privilege, how are we, again, still using this moment to elevate, to support, to shift power to the people that should be designing and running and leading this agenda going forward. So yeah, I know I kind of took it in a different direction, but I felt like that's what keeps me, you know, the actual people doing this work and then unique approaches. That's what keeps me inspired and hopeful in thinking about this work and how we can meet the moment. And I'd love to hear your, you know, the panelists, not just have that.
Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you for everybody. And also, it's very easy to speak last because everything has been said. I'll just rehash some of the points that you raised. But I think for the region, that is the Horn of Africa. I think Somalia had famine in 2011. South Sudan had famine in 2017. The way I think the experts measure food insecurity, we have the FuseNet famine early warning system that really tracks food insecurity. I don't want to bore you with the technicalities, but it has got 5 levels. The 5th level is when it is declared, you know, this famine has occurred in a country or parts of the country. That website, the whole process is funded by USAID. That website is down. So if you add that coupled with vacuuming of aid from the system in a region where you have a ton of conflict and also ground zero of climate change, but more importantly, both of them going on simultaneously in places like Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan, then we will not be able to not only know that famine or food insecurity is occurring, but also the response that, you know, a lot of these organizations do not have funding. All right. So I think what I always come back to in this particular moment is the people who defend aid and the people who do not want aid or anti-aid have no idea of the breadth of the US funding. Last month I was in Nairobi. I went to one of the informal settlement area. I was having a conversation with one lady who does a lot of activism. She said to me, Abdullahi, we do not have condoms. That means GBV numbers will go up. So I think it is also in the spirit of trying to figure out, something positive. There are various local organic, groups that are really doing a good work, especially in Sudan, where emergency groups are delivering the last mile delivery of humanitarian aid, because the delivery of humanitarian aid is very difficult, it's expensive, it is also not safe and secure. But since the start of conflict, 2023, mid-April, they are still delivering humanitarian aid. The amount of money that they use compared to big humanitarian aid groups is negligible. But they are delivering. That doesn't mean that it's perfect. That doesn't mean that it might become the future of delivery of humanitarian aid. But there is something that is developing. Secondly, to your point about power shifting, this is the moment. If for a very long time, groups like ourselves have been saying, oh no, local groups know better, local groups are cost efficient, cost effective, local groups know local realities. These are the moments where, at the very minimum, those local groups are given platforms, are given opportunity to say, we are willing and able to learn from them, so that, when the professional large scale, aid is gone, these people will be able to do it. Like, for instance, any diaspora in this hall send money from time to time, it's not recorded. Like, if you take the Somalia 2024 humanitarian plan versus the amount of money Somalis in diaspora send, those numbers are insane. It's like 2.4 billion. So there are ways. We need to be leaning into diasporic humanitarian groups, charities that usually give aid to, and then also one. I work with refugee spaces. I have to speak about refugees for obvious reasons. Kenya has a new refugee law. It's not new anymore. It's 4 years now, but it gives refugees right to work, freedom of movement, and other rights. Ethiopia passed something similar, not a law but a directive, that refugees have right to work, freedom of movement, and they can own properties. Small spaces like that, with all their inadequacies, we need to be stepping in, supporting them, for them to be able to do what they need to do. But for the whole, like the real thing is, the region is governed by rains, not governed by some of the politicians. If it doesn't rain, we'll see crisis. But people have been delivering humanitarian aid, even if it's not formally defined as humanitarian aid, but if it's customized, if it's done very well, they will be able to bridge the gap. But we shouldn't be afraid. This is a brave new world. Like what Bridget said, there will be a lot of suffering. Like, let's not kid ourselves. USA expecting any other actor to come in and be able to step up, I think that is running full errands. There will be a lot of suffering. But my hope and prayer is that out of that, we'll be able to do aid differently, because even people who do aid and that defending aid, they know that aid the way we do it is not efficient. Aid the way we do it could be done better. Deep down in our hearts of hearts, we know that. But maybe I don't want to use that word very glibly, but we've been offered a chance to rethink, to reimagine, to redo, and put the people in whose name we are doing all the things that we are doing at the center of it. Maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to do something new and different.
Can I ask a question? And then, you want to go first? Okay, just to follow up on that, because I think many things can be true at the same time. And I think your final point that we need to hold the incredible, horrific impacts that are going to be happening, that are happening right now from this, and the people who are most impacted, who are going to be the most vulnerable, who are most impacted, and hold that reality and everything we can do to mitigate that harm. And at the same time, simultaneously, we have to live into this. What does this moment call us to? And how do we envision a different world that we could, help build out of these, sort of chaos that we're seeing around us? But I don't see the new vision forming yet. Maybe we're starting it here. Maybe this is what students here in this program are going to help us do, and everybody in this conversation can do. But how do we form that new vision? How does that happen? That centers those who need to be centered and haven't been centered, that, actually takes seriously human dignity for everyone, that actually does make never again a reality, that actually creates a more equal, just, and peaceful world. Like, how do we get to that vision? Kuskani's got it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. And any system has a shock level. And I think it's like, this is the whole entire enterprise of aid gets shocked. And because our mentality on human rights and atrocity prevention was that we have systems in place, that is human rights documentation and then advocacy, and then you go either to the US embassy, somebody is arrested, or journalists, you just make phone call and make pressure, or go to have that discussion with other international organization within the UN or within the African Union, and pressure for to at least prevent and avoid. That is what our brains are wired on, working within the systems to be able to prevent that. Now that is in a big shock. And I think this shock, you can never, underestimate human ingenuity. I think there is always a reaction to that shock. And it takes a bit of time for us to see. And I am saying this for an instance. When we were when war started in Sudan in April, the country is very centralized at this stage. Means bank, buses, trains, telecom, everything is in the capital. When the war started in the capital, the same day the whole state system collapsed. It doesn't exist. It is rubble of destruction, and everyone just running. You have, Khartoum itself is one of the largest cities in Africa, with around almost 10 million people. All of these people are just running in different directions. For almost 3 months or 4 months, Sudanese all over the world, no one you would see has sent, the amount of aid, and that is, what's unaccounted, which is the remittance, is almost double. The African diaspora contribute to even the aid, and by remittance, double of whatever other agencies are doing. And that's like, you see amount of money that people can just send through the bank, which is a kind of a mobile money. And I think that is where, how do we transform, how do we use advanced technology to actually address some of those problems? Why you have to buy a corn from Alabama to go to feed someone in South Sudan? It is wet, it is green, you can farm anything. And yeah, it's just, we need to rethink on how all these regimes and all these systems work. Because if I have an aid that is $20 million for a health problem in some region or district, that money will go at least $5 million. So all of this will. So I think it is time for us to rethink how aid is being done, but also that comes with how atrocity prevention is being done. And you will see currently, if you compare, the global atrocities from Sudan, from Bolivia, from Congo, from Palestine, and you see the social reaction of it is very high compared to 10 years ago. And this is because of technology. It is just 5-minute video, a few seconds video clip that can go to millions of watch, and that is why These are institutions, and one person who made that video is more impactful than anything else I do. So it's like, how do we use the technological advancement in advantage of atrocity prevention? What we are losing, what I'm seeing about the downturn now, is that people in Chicago who are protesting for atrocity in Congo, they don't have incentives, diplomatic incentives to pressure, M23 to stop that. So we are trying to figure out how that will look like. What is something that we can use it? Because before it's like, okay, US will say, oh, I will, sanction, these people and I will pressure them. If that is no longer the tool, what are the alternative tools that we can use? If there might be other external actors that has a benefit in that conflict, is that mineral? Yes. So which company is buying things? Let's boycott. So we need to be, and that's where, this is a time of reflection, of looking and opening new windows of being able to react and pressure and prevent atrocities, even if the whole systemic approach isn't working. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to latch on. So, is this too late? No. Okay. I'm doing distance. I'm not good with distance, but it's some of the words echoed a lot about shock. I'm going to engage a bit into autocriticism. While we want to lift ourselves up, I think also for us, the NGOs who work in this field, it's time to get over the pandemic and some of the bad habits we have learned in terms of not working as hard as we should, and to actually stop working and not pretend to work as some of the boutique NGOs pretend to work and actually never deliver results. It's time to call out inefficiencies and failure in our system. And it's part of our own cleaning the house, because there are some boutique NGOs that shouldn't exist in our field and who never delivered, but are really spending so many resources that could be used for something else. Now, I agree with you that rethinking aid, nobody will miss the Beltway bandits. If they are gone, let's face it, that 20% that just went to pay for cozy living in the US and in other global north states will not be missed by anybody if it ever goes into the right direction. So there are, I agree, very many opportunities. There are also lots of challenges in terms of this, but the opportunities, I would like to echo the idea about actually getting things local. There was so much talk about localization. And we also, let's be sincere, the results in localization were abysmal in the institutional sphere. I don't know if it's ever gotten above the 9% yet, no, for USAID ever. So yeah, let's be sincere about this. And this is a moment to actually do that, because that's what works, supporting local initiatives. I also hope that this is a bit taking it, I don't know, Max, if this is too optimistic, but being sincere in this reevaluation of where things are and starting to work very hard to make things better, I think it also needs the recognition that atrocities are not what only and what we've been focusing on a lot, meaning domestic conflict giving opportunities for atrocities. There's been lots of focus on that because that was the reality for quite a few years. But now the risks for non-conflict atrocities, your classic authoritarian crimes against humanity being carried out outside a hot internal conflict are huge. That also, I think, helps again make the case for earlier prevention, because domestic authoritarian context prevention, even in its worst moments, looks like early prevention, because you do not have a midstream opportunity in a way that prevention is conceived of in the case of hot conflicts. Also, speaking about the classic wars between states as potentially, given that conflict is going to rise, that means there will be there are already immense amounts of war crimes. There will be even a lot more. There will be a lot more repeats of Bucha in different conflicts. So also thinking about those are also atrocities that we have to engage with. And also in terms of cleaning house, I'm so glad you mentioned the Human Rights Council, but it's also time to speak about the multilateral sphere's failures. Because we've been holding up this space quite a bit, and of course we are advocates for multilateral engagement and for a multilateral world, but some of the spaces where atrocity prevention is being promoted in the multilateral sphere are failing constantly in actually delivering what they are supposed to deliver, both in terms of early prevention and conflict management opportunities that supposedly they have. And it is also time to be sincere about this and not just continue the same regional consultations games that actually don't produce valuable information and engage with risk factors, the actual things we know that need to be mitigated in order to prevent atrocities. Sorry, I hope I'm again not too pessimistic.
No, I would love to just pick up on the self-reflection of our field, because I think that the other thing that's happening and that has needed to happen for people in the United States who are part of this work in this field is we really need to reckon with our own country. It has been, a privilege to say I work on atrocity prevention internationally without looking at the realities of our own country. And our field has, been doing better at that, I think. But I think this reality of the US situation is going to force us to have to reckon with our past, with the genocides upon which this country was built, and with our present, and with the serious risks that our country is barreling towards in terms of authoritarianism here and the risks of atrocities here. I was in Poland with Tibi and others for the Lemkin seminar and toured Auschwitz for the first time. And of course, that's a harrowing experience. And there in Auschwitz, 1 million Jews were horrifically killed, of course. But part of the tour, you learn, well, it's actually was set up first as a prison camp. And the first people who were put into the prison camp were students and professors and monks and political opponents, people who didn't agree with the Nazi regime that was occupying. And I finished that tour and opened the news for the US that day. And the peace building student from Georgetown had been detained for no legal reason, simply because the work he was doing didn't sit well with our administration. So part of what I think is happening and has to happen is we in this country have to figure out, how do we push back against this? How do we organize locally from the local up because we are the ones responsible for this government. I, as a US citizen, am saying I am responsible for the US government. And if we're not going to do that, put some brakes on and some guardrails, who will? And so that, though, I think is a really wonderful opportunity, because we can now be more responsible for our own house. And in doing that, connect with, learn from, build the transnational networks of civil society that we can, that I think are going to be needed and are going to be part of what has to develop and evolve as, some kind of new system. So I think that is part of the work that's here for us.
I mean, yes, I echo all of that, Bridget, and I love where we're taking the conversation, because what I would like to talk with you all about is, this prompt that you gave us is what gets us excited, what gets us impassioned, what are the things that you see that are like, yes, that is the movement, like not just saying, so yes, I mean, I wrote my notes last night. We have to keep our eyes open on the atrocity context. That's our responsibility. That's like the bread and butter. We cannot just look away, because we know these are the moments when potential perpetrators can take advantage of our distraction. So that's like, for me, that's like a requirement of our field in this moment. We cannot look away. We cannot get distracted. We know that's when the violence increases. So that to me is like must do. And then what you just said, completely agree with. There must be a clear-eyed view of the US and its role in increasing atrocity risk abroad and at home, and the actual commission of atrocities both at home and abroad. I mean, and that's where I love work like protection approaches, which, you know, a long time ago, or whatever, 10 years ago, right, was saying we're looking at the UK Commission of Violence in our country, and the US was like, oh, I mean, we don't have any organization that looks at both. You can't do this work outside and not inside. So just that titration of the two is a requirement. And really acknowledging that anytime an American especially does this work, you've got to be very clear of the contradictions and the hypocrisy, which have always been present, but are more so now than ever. And then my third thought, you know, last night when I was reflecting, was how do we use the moment skillfully to mobilize people? Because there's such a moment right now where how people like us speak, you know, who we're talking to, what we're saying, the language that we're using can really be a moment of, you know, of mobilization and like, and broadening the movement. And I'm not just talking about the atrocity prevention movement, and it really matters how we show up and the words that we say and who we talk to. And I think it's like coming together and thinking about what that message is and having these moments where we come together. And so I'm so grateful for I-GMAP, because how we can't do this sitting alone at IAPG or sitting at FC. We can't do this in individual NGOs. We can't do it within our UN or in our whatever, wherever we're sitting. Like there's got to be these opportunities to do this as a collective together, crossing philanthropy and academia and all the 10,000 silos that we have that are so incredibly narrow and small. So where are we going to find those moments where we can bring the money people with the academic people, with the NGO practitioner, with the diplomats? Like for us to, we have gotten so far down in our silos doing this work. It's like, it becomes so small and narrow, you know? And like, again, this is a moment where we have to find each other and come up with some creative strategy and meet the moment. So I just love talking about that. And I would love that to be, you know, frontier prevention. It's not just the same old conversation we've been having. If I have to talk about, you know, the same diplomatic, economic, information tools of atrocity prevention and all the toolkits, like I will die. You know what I mean? Like I will literally die. Like I am still in this field all these years later because I see like there's hope and there's excitement and there's creativity and there's possibility. And, you know, what other issue can we all rally around than this? It's like, it's so basic. Like, just don't kill people based on who they are. It's like, it's so simple. So we can again meet this moment. Anyhow, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
I just want to throw one other thing into the mix, which I love this conversation about all of the different challenges, but also opportunities at this moment. One thing, and this goes back to a point that Kuskandi made, is, you know, the global attention on atrocities, I think, is much higher now than it's been in a really long time. And I think that's largely because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and also, of course, the atrocities in Gaza. More people now than I think in my memory are asking, what is genocide? What are crimes against humanity? What are war crimes? Wanting to know what this all means and trying to engage with these terms. How do you think like the focus on those two crimes in particular, atrocities in particular, but also more broadly, what are the challenges and also the opportunities that arise from that new public attention that these horrific events are bringing to the conversation?
I don't know if I'll be able to answer your question, but I'll try. The reality is, I want to pick up from where we left. Without beating ourselves down as if we don't have enough of other external forces making our lives miserable. But I think being extremely straight-jacketed, monitoring, evaluation, learning, grant writing, toolkit, all these things have atrophied. We know it. We see. We as a community of practice, we refuse to really step up, to really think, to be, you know, to say that we don't know. So I think to the extent that we are being assaulted from various areas, but also we have to say that, look, We might not like what they say and how they say. There are elements of truth in what they are saying. If you say what excites us when you wake up in the morning, I mean, it's helping someone out there who is facing violation of any kind. And don't kill people, give people aid is so straightforward. It doesn't require, us drafting this amazing, work plan and all that kind of stuff. So I think in terms of solutions, I think groups like ourselves and others, we are just going to be, a very customized technical advisory group rather than telling somebody in Sudan, oh no, but what does it take to take aid from the warehouse to people who are in need? It shouldn't be that complicated. I think that is something that is very important. But I think to your point about, there is a broader media and individual attention on atrocities. People are saying it's no longer a niche project where people who have got, PhDs and, very good understanding of international law, international humanitarian law. There is an opportunity. But what I see along the time is two things going on simultaneously. People are incredibly paralyzed because of the way, the communication and technology infrastructure has evolved. You can be anywhere and you'll be able to see what is going on in far remote country that you do not have a relationship apart from just, at a human level. So the people who know are just paralyzed. The institutions are paralyzed as well, right? I mean, to the extent that, we are all sitting there and saying, fighting over the G word. Is it capital G or small g? If somebody is dying, it's from the end of the story, So I think, but there needs to be, groups like ourselves, community of practice, to be able to say that, look, this is an opportunity to educate and bring the people with us. I mean, as long as we are not engaging the people, meaning the broader citizenry, it will still be us meeting, us talking, us shaking our heads because we can finish each other's sentences. We all know what needs to be said and how it needs to be said. We're in the same school, the same workshop, we read the same publication, we know each other's. But I think just removing all the fun and just putting it at a very reducing everything to its fundamental essence. We use a lot of English, we use a lot of letters, we use a lot of flow charts and whatever. People dying is not good. End of the story. People shouldn't stop. It's end of the story. It doesn't end, but we are making the communications very, very, very well. Finally, I think embracing the technology of the delivery of the messaging is so important. It's not enough just to put in a press release that we convert into PDF and attach it and send it out to the media. I used to work in the newsroom. A lot of those ones are not read. But if you just say 3 lines and you put it and you send it in the body of the email, it will get a pickup. Developing relationship with media outfit, both traditional and non-traditional, is going to be very important. Everybody now will have to be a comms person, be able to engage with journalists, cultivate them, because information is important, but how that information is packaged and put out there is as important as well.
Can I offer a reflection on the question too? And I really appreciate everything you just said about simplifying in a lot of ways. And I think this is an opportunity. We do need, you need definitions, you need legalities, but this field gets wrapped up in trying to define, is it or is it not, while people are dying. It happens in every genocide, in every atrocity situation. I don't really consider myself an expert in atrocity prevention or part of the atrocity prevention field. I ended up in this because I believe peace is possible. I believe people should not kill each other. And I think we actually, as human beings, can achieve that. I think we can actually build a world where that is far less, at least, than what it is now. And atrocity prevention, though, and genocide, it gets people's attention politically as well. And there's kind of a line where people are like, well, yeah, we can fight about whether a war might be justified, but genocide, like there's a line on that. So getting people's attention is really important. But I think the lived realities is what should inform the development of what comes next in this field. And, Michael Sadipo in Nigeria, I quote him a lot. I don't care what you call it in the international community. We want it to stop. you know? So I think there is a sense of simplifying, and people right now, because the world is in chaos, because there are so many situations that are shocking our moral conscience and leaving us paralyzed and confused, people are asking, like, what do we do about this? And what is the world that we actually want? And I think that, you know, Cory Booker was brilliant on the floor for 25 hours of the Senate, basically saying to Congress in America, what is the country you want to be, really? And we have this opportunity, I think, for people who are saying, what is the world we want? And how do we be part of making that world? And so I think this field is becoming more intersectional, which is really good. And I think it'll become even more so through everything that is happening. You know, it's going to be about democracy. It's going to be about climate and indigenous rights. And it's going to be much more intersectional. And I think that will serve us in doing better in building that world.
Yeah, and just to react as well in the same line, you know, when in 2003, I was in the University of Khartoum when the genocide started in Khartoum. And few of us as the students was finding very hard to even convince our colleague mates that what is happening, that other people are killed. You know, I remember when my classmate from South Darfur, his family is the only person in university. And then his family at home in the morning, the antelope broke on the ground. And he was the only one person in the family that was alive. And for us, like, we have to bring him to tell them this is happening now in the phone. Because the national TV was bringing all the news about the war in Gaza at that time and the war in Congo. But there was nothing, people didn't know anything about that there is actually hundreds of thousands of Sudanese being killed in their own country. And seeing that comparing to what is public awareness in Sudanese about now war, I would just say that, you know, there is a very huge transformation from, you know, that was analog time to now digital time, to now even AI and quantum computation. So the space of knowledge and connectivity absolutely changed. And we as human, we are emotional beings. The proximity and relativity is the key for sympathy. You need to relate to things, you need to connect to build sympathy. And that is why people who commit atrocity and kill people, they, like, you know, in Rwanda, cockroach, you know, they always give them names to put them in a down level to justify their killing, because if they're human like them, it is very difficult to kill. And you have to disconnect and make them something else to justify their killing. And that is why the internet breaks that space and creates that connectivity. You find someone, a teenager from Japan, that actually has friends somewhere in Ecuador or, you know, Bolivia, and they actually pick up friends and they talk. And with that, they create a lot of connection beyond that one single friend. And when the event happens, they are able to build more connectivity and being able to spare more time to be able to have that personal conversation. And that's why I see the opportunity for us. You know, I think there is a high risk within this, as we see in Burma, how the military use the Facebook to wage genocide. In Ethiopia, the Telegram. In Sudan, WhatsApp. You know, video, live, killing people, and the next day this strikes, and then this goes and then this strikes women and puts women underwear, and then the whole tribe go and kill thousands for retaliation. So the digital space have high risk as well to increase atrocity. But in a situation like I-GMAP and other institutions, it's like, how do we create more students, more young people that are actually aware about this, and they can actually use their space to create more content, more good content. So you cannot, and I believe that you cannot fight misinformation online by controlling. Sometimes it's very difficult if you have authoritarian position. But by creating more good content, you can actually be able to confuse the confuser and be able to actually get the right message there. So I think it's just we really need to, and I think there's a huge transformation. That's what I'm saying. But with this transformation comes with, but there's also a lot of opportunities that we really need to take it very much closer to be able to make the impact that is needed.
I also had, again, distance. I also had a few thoughts on the question. It's incredible. I would add to the two best known atrocities now, the atrocities in Ukraine, the atrocities happening in Israel, Palestine. I would also add the acknowledgement that risk is increasing in the US has actually made the reality of explaining why atrocity prevention is necessary easier. So that's an outcome. As people don't say, oh, this will never happen here. That's not an answer you get these days. So that's actually, I think there's a perception of risk around the world being higher. At the same time, it going mainstream, the topic going mainstream has resulted in, and I'm very glad we are discussing this in an educational institution, it showed that the emperor's clothes are not there when it comes to lots of people working in government and dealing with this issue, and especially in the media. The coverage and the really bad relationship with what atrocities are showed that there's not a basic understanding sometimes of what genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes are, and how potentially prevention looks. So that also sets a tone for us needing to be better about getting this not just in the mainstream discussion, but also in education, as I-GMAP is doing, and making sure that this actually gets mainstream, because unfortunately it's a reality we are facing very often in our societies. So I think that has been essential. And I have these cringy moments remembering when people who have worked on atrocity prevention are invited by journalists to and interviewing them, and then they are talking about how genocide and crimes against humanity are at the same level of severity in our societies, and the journalist still pummels away, but genocide, the crime of crimes, and it's like, no, not really same in terms of gravity, or the idea that this has emerged also, I think, as a dangerous thing. And another dangerous thing that's emerged in going mainstream, the idea that mass atrocities can be legitimated, the idea that certain mass atrocities are legitimate for some reason, that's an absolutely dangerous and toxic idea, because no, we agreed as humanity that mass atrocities are never legitimate. Nothing legitimizes a mass atrocity. But that is a recurrent idea, and that's an insult to every victim of a mass atrocity. And if we don't manage to communicate that, then we fail big time in restoring dignity. And this is one of the things that horrifies me about this moment, about what is happening to us because of the conflicts. No, we need to somehow fight this very heavily through content, but I'm not as optimistic as you are about technology. I'm so sorry. The companies suck. They don't want to do anything, just make money. They are thieves, unregulated thieves, and they don't just steal our money, they also steal our lives. So it's time to fight them properly in every possible way, not just with good content. Take them to court, punish them through legislative matters, and organize around it, because they've been getting away with it all, So sorry, I get it.
We would love to have some of you pose your questions or make your. So I'm going to collect like maybe two of them, and then we'll keep going.
Mine will be very quick. It's just to follow up on Tibi's comment about technology. Are you aware of the documentary film, The Social Dilemma, that was put out by Netflix during COVID and showing its impact on the younger generation? There is a coalition of former and I don't remember the name of the organization, of former people that worked in Silicon Valley that helped to build the internet and what they're trying to do to fight back. So
Yeah.
you might want to watch that.
Thank you.
No, I would
The
just say,
social dilemma.
I would just say on technology, I think we've been talking some on the sidelines about the reality that what's happening, what's new right now with what's happening with the Trump administration is the imposition of AI into all of this. And it's extremely dangerous. It increases the speed and the magnitude of what can be done. And yeah, so we need that as a whole other conference. I think.
Well, first, I want to say after the last 11 weeks, I kind of needed this panel, so thank you. So as an academic, you know, I focus a lot in this fellowship on being able to better educate our students. But I think one of the things that stuck out with me is this idea of expanded intersectionality, right? And so I have been, helplessness is a weapon, right? That feeling of helplessness is a purposeful weapon to keep people from doing all the things we've been talking about. I've been using my social media because I feel knowledge is also a responsibility to kind of, knowingly put myself at risk to speak out a lot. But because of that, I've been getting a lot of reactions from people, not students, but in my community who are coming to me just yesterday saying, will you speak to my group? One is an activist group, and one is just a casual group of friends who like to get together and talk about topics. And I just want to hear a little bit more from you about, because the two things I always want to know boiled down are, number one, am I crazy? Right? Am I overblowing this, which we've talked about a lot, which I think is good. And number two, what can I do? And I think that my first reaction was, I'm not an expert, I'm not qualified to talk to you about that. But then I realized, no, I'm a human, right? It's bad, right? And so just talking, I think, a little bit more about how to simplify this, give people who are not formal students, who are not in these organizations, actionable items where they can resist that feeling of helplessness and create that change we're talking about, and that new kind of order of aid, that new kind of order of responsibility and self-reflection that we're all looking for.
I'll start, because absolutely you're doing exactly what we need, and we need everyone to do it, and everyone to understand that this change doesn't come from experts, in Washington, D.C. or anywhere else. This change comes from all of us participating and using whatever skills and talents and knowledge we have in many, many different ways. I think so I work at an organization that really tries to give people practical things they can do to, educate, advocate, lobby members of Congress. And that is always something I encourage everyone to do. Members of Congress, the Congress is not standing up right now, and members of Congress will not do anything unless their constituents push them to do it. And they will actually do things when their constituents push them to do it. It's actually very powerful sometimes. But I think actually what is going to be one of the most important things in this new phase is community building. And what you're talking about, small groups getting together to talk and build community together, educate each other, and figure out what could we do right here, right now in our community. That is something. When I got here, it's so nice to get out of Washington. I was walking down the street and I saw there was I don't know what it was, but it's some little place in Binghamton. They had rainbow flags on the windows. It said safe space for LGBTQ. And it gave me so much hope. Like, here we are, a little, small community that just says, we're still here. We're not going to erase people or let people be unsafe. Those things we need at a local level across this country. And then we need to think about how are we in solidarity and learning from folks all around the world who've lived through these experiences, still are, and how do we build solidarity as well? So just some thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is just something that's like for my experience, and this happens in different countries I lived, and it is also in US. I think for us, who are very liberal, I think sometimes we are very intolerant for difference. If you see someone who actually looks, even if that is your cousin or your uncle that looks conservative, you boycott it. And I think that is very, very dangerous, because the hatred comes out of fear. for someone to reach a level to hate something, they have to be scared enough to do that. And the compassion and love comes out of because you're very much empowered. And I think those people, the more you isolate, the more, the more they become distant, and the more and I think, talk to someone who you don't agree with. Take time, listen, it's conflict is part of our life. We don't have to agree on anything. Try to figure out to create a community for people you don't agree. No, read a book you don't like it. Because it helps you to understand. Because if you don't understand people's emotion and people's reaction to emotion, it will be very hard to change. And I think when these things are so much polarizing, the side that is winning is the side who has the courage to be able to sit down and talk. And when that doesn't exist, the fear wins, and everyone is scared. And any decision that individuals take when they are afraid, are actually less irrational. It can be a whole effect that causes, psychosis, and people go into those, parallels of illusions. So I think it is just, how autocrats win is putting us in the boxes, and those boxes don't connect, and they are allowed to put in the box that they like, whatever trash they want to put. And then for us, it's like, nah, we're not going this. And then the divide continues. And I think, breaking this bridge, it actually requires the courage to be able to talk to someone who is different.
I would also say that whenever that authoritarian regimes, they actually aim at atomizing people. It's part of the strategy. And they deliver these shows of fear very often. Many of you probably saw the tough student being taken away. Like that looked like Argentina during the disappearances. That's a technique to scare people. That is not done as an individual act. That is an action that resonates in society and made us all feel alone and at risk. We speak about prevention. We have the medical, model of prevention started our models, our work. Please take the moments when you notice that feeling as a moment of extreme crisis in your social being, and do exactly what you said. Reach out to people, be with other people, and do something to combat that, because otherwise they are winning. That's what they do.
I just have to put in a plug too that this, in terms of the effects of social media, I mean, a lot of us were in our formative years read a lot of Hannah Arendt. And if you think back to the origins of totalitarianism, you remember the very unexpected but really powerful argument she made for what has to be the case before totalitarianism can successfully implant itself in a population. And it was loneliness. Gotta give that a beat. And then
this is more of an observation than a question, but going back to Max's original discussion prompt, which was, why don't we just wait out this U.S. administration? We'll just rebuild after it's over. And the opportunities that you've been pointing to actually address the answer to that question, which is no. When you lose trust, your allies don't come back. Once you've lost trust, you may or may not get it back. And that's why this interconnectivity, the community building, all these opportunities you pointed out are so important, is because we will not probably go back to being a leader in this or being a good ally.
Who else wants to jump in?
I wanted to come back to the concept of reckoning, and this is really a question for you guys who are in the aid world, and I'm not in the aid world. I wonder whether there's this emphasis on the Trump administration being a radically different approach to U.S. policy, when in fact it might just be a clarity in U.S. policy. and ripping off the pretense and the mask of providing aid around the world while it is aiding and abetting a genocide in Gaza, not to mention supporting the war and the atrocities in Yemen for nearly a decade. And, you know, for many of us, understanding and seeing the role of US aid as a reflection of soft power, as a reflection of power and influence that the Trump administration has merely realized is not a good use of its resources, and there's no need for soft power. And, you know, I really wonder what kinds of issues you grapple with in terms of being on the receiving end of a genocide supporting state, and what kind of dilemmas that might create, and whether this reckoning is something that should have happened earlier, while the monies were still flowing, and in particular USAID being a particular culprit here, given its abysmal failures during the Biden administration. I'm just wondering whether, you know, how you all have reflected on that.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think I think this reality of U.S. foreign policy trying to be different things to different people, it's throughout our whole history. That's the reality. I have been working. It's funny to find myself like defending USAID when I have worked for many years to try to say, this is not the system. This is not working. We need something different. And so I've been really thinking about, like, how do you, and I also did 2 years inside USAID, and that was really helpful because I saw, oh my God, there's so many good people actually really trying to do good things in a horribly broken system. So I think that it is a moment of clarity. The question is, like, clarity toward what? Like, what do we do next and what do we want to be? Because Trump is exposing the very real, you know, racism, white supremacy, colonialism, militarism that has run through our country always, the United States always. And at the same time, you know, Cory Booker is standing on the Senate floor talking about the real, as an African American, the soul of America that he wants to save. That is the promise of what we want the country to be. That has also always, you know, has always been run through our country. So we're at this moment, I think, where we need to decide and we need to organize and act to say, what is the country we actually really want, and how are we gonna build that? Because it does exist in both ways. And, you know, there's a vote yesterday on the floor for stopping U.S. weapons to Israel that got fewer votes. This is the Sanders-Jared joint resolution of disapproval, got fewer votes this time than last time. You know, and so, yeah, we have a lot of reckoning to do is, I guess, my response. Yeah. Others? I mean, I can, but I feel like you're coming. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not easy to turn down the mic. I think you raised a very important question about being lonely, being alone. I think you're not wrong feeling that way. You know, when the institutions' way of doing, way of thinking that we've all been socialized to work through just feels completely different, it is hard. But at the same time, it is not terminal. It's not that we are fated to suffer this and this should just be it. We should lie down and, you know, receive it as it is. Because to be hopeful is also to be disciplined about it, right? Hope is discipline, right? So also at the same time, organizing, whether it is within our community, you know, church, you know, Facebook group, community, whatever they are, I think that would be far more important at this particular stage, rather than giving up, which is also the very easy thing to do when you are being assaulted from literally every direction. You know, you wait for Friday evenings, which executive order are they sending, right? And everybody is terrified, oh no, what will this mean? But they are they know what they're doing, right? I mean, like they are counterpunching you every single day until you become drunk and you've got nothing else but to submit because the zone has been flooded. Your entire soul just feels like, crawling and be back in your bed, turn off the lights and everything. But that is when they win, right? I mean, like Martin Luther King say, those who, those who supporting peace, or I mean, I would butcher it, but should be as organized as those, as effectively as those who support the war. Like they are organized. I think organizing together, I think also will go a very long way in taking care of that. That is a very long-winded way of saying that there is not one app that we can just go and press. There's no one pill that we are going to swallow and then we will reset and then we'll go forward. But I think it is very important to realize that this is reckoning for many, many, many people, whether it's atrocity prevention, aid industry, human rights, where we are all stuck. But also it's a lesson in many ways. United States provide, I think, upward of 40% of humanitarian aid around the world. That's a huge amount of risks that the industry has taken. We all wait when a journalist is arrested, go to the US embassy in whichever country, they make the call and somebody's released. I think we've had such a huge, right, single point of failure for all of us. And now we have to think if something else can be done and will be done and should be done. But are we ready? I think we should be very careful also of, becoming merchants of nostalgia. I mean, like that is how things were done. At the same time, we have to be very careful that we will not create a perfect system that will be able to reckon with this. We have, the planetary crisis of, climate change. We have, genocide and famine in some parts of the world going on at the same time. We're not going to wipe them off the face of the earth. They will be there, and we will have to respond to it. People are not going to sit down and wait to die a slow death because they don't have food. They will work. And how can we be present with them, support them, and be able to do that work? And you say very clearly, let's do the damn work. The work has to be done. Whether we feel it, whether we just, today you just read a terrible news coming from Gaza, Congo, Sudan, and you've completely been assaulted. The work has to be done. We have to leave. We have no opportunity. We have no excuse. We will have to leave. I think that is just to say that let's get to work. Let's do the damn job. And that is the only thing that is important at this particular moment. Frameworks, workshops, grammar, definitions will come. But because we are living in that moment, it becomes very difficult to see, where every single day feels like existential.
Let's see if we can squeeze in. I'm okay. Let's just hear two more people, and we will end right at.
What I was saying sort of speaks to Bridget's comment. I'm an institutionalist, and the problem with the United States is, sorry, that was loud enough. Big voice. The problem with the United States is that we were built on an institution. Our institutions were created to really prohibit groups from exercising agency, right? And so to change the outcome, you have to change the institutions. We have so many mechanisms in place to prevent that from happening. But suggestions would be change our electoral system, go from the single member district system to proportional representation, right? In countries that have PR, you have groups that can find a party, some representation, and this party can have an impact on policymaking. Stuff like that. It's just like we don't want to do the work because it's hard.
Okay, we're going to get, thank you. We're going to get one last voice heard from, that is hard. And then there'll be time for your break. I'm sorry that there's not more time. Please go ahead.
My question is, I'm noticing a lot of parallels between domestic civil society and foreign civil society. And even if those parallels aren't in the same place in terms of violence, when we look at poverty, food insecurity, they're much closer. So what routes, what steps, and what avenues are there between the fragmented American civil society and foreign civil society in connecting and communicating right now?
Thank you. Everybody gets 30 seconds to answer that question. We'll start with Anne.
Oh, goodness. I like the other thing. You keep doing it. I'm gonna go back. I mean, I just loved how you explained the concept of reckoning. I'm pointing to my friend, but I want to look at you for a moment, just because you said it so beautifully and so clearly. And I built a whole course around decolonizing aid before this whole moment that was in part off Peace Direct's work and lots of important work. And so it was very confusing to me personally when I was like, wait, but this is kind of a good thing that it's all being dismantled, and then, but how do we actually articulate what you've just articulated? Because those systems were violent and now they're broken. And so what do we say now? And that gets back to how do we articulate this particular point that you're making clearly, while also, what do we say? What do we say to that point? And it gets back to the imagining and the reimagining and the okay, what do we say now? And I feel like for me, again, I was talking to Bridget and Nicole last night about this, but 20 years ago, and when I'm sitting in elite university in London, and Niall Ferguson is telling me about empire in decline and how the U.S. is in decline, empires are up and down, and this is just, for me, it's so clear, right? This moment that we're in, it's a clear empire in decline kind of moment. And what does that mean? If this is empire in decline, are we just going to wait for the next empire to rise? Where are we in the history of this long thousands of years process of empires coming in and out? And what are we creating next? And how can we shift that? And then I'm kind of bringing in your question about institutions, right? And the structural systems, and having a little space from being in institutions has allowed me to really sink into the structures of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy that are inside my body. And this gets into your, what do I do now? I'm kind of trying to link these different ideas. And for me, it has been really having an honest stock taking of how those structures are inside of my body, inside of this white American female body, right? Cisgender, all the things. And really interrogating that and looking at how I move through the world and how I'm showing up and where is my money going and how am I showing up in my community and what school systems are my children going to? How am I raising boys in America in patriarchy, in capitalism? You know what I mean? So I'm bringing it home. That's at the end of the day, there's so much work there. There is literally a whole lifetime of work just to make sure that I am not increasing the risk of atrocities in my own life. Do you know what I mean? So I just that's where I have tried to bring it home. It's very nice. It sounds really lovely if I go work in state government for all these fancy institutions, but if I'm not living those values in my own life and actively really interrogating how I'm showing up in places, then it's it's how I criticize all of these human rights defenders that are actually pretty violent people. You know what I mean? And so it's those contradictions, the hypocrisy of all of this work, of all of these structures that have been created. It's very much alive. And I think it's inside of all of our bodies, because guess what? We are swimming through the waters of these systems. And so how are we doing that? So anyhow, I'm just to bring it home to the individual, I feel like that helps me try to find my way.
Okay, we are at time, so yeah, we are.
Ah.
I did warn you. Hold on. So we are at time. Before we thank our panelists, just a reminder, you have a half an hour outside for our break. And for those of you who didn't get to ask your questions, I'm sorry. We will absolutely do our best to include everybody who wants to participate. That's why we're all here. So we'll see you at 11:30 promptly. And please join me in thanking our panelists for